So we're talking on a Thursday morning, 2 days after the last round of primaries. And if you're following the primaries to determine which way the Republican Party is going, you got kind of a mixed message on Tuesday, I'd say.
I think superficially you would get a mixed message, right? So I assume you're talking about Trump, and in North Carolina, Trump was one for two.
South Carolina.
I keep doing that. In South Carolina, Trump was 1 for 2, right? So he took out Nancy Mace. I'm sorry. Nancy Mace survived, even though he opposed her. I'm very tired today. Tom Rice, he took out. Tom Rice voted for impeachment. And so I think at first blush, if you were just looking at that, you would say, Trump, he wins some, he loses some. But I think that misrepresents what really happened, because Nancy Mace really, I think, flirted with criticizing Trump, but quickly came back and tried to win him back. And
but he didn't endorse her.
What's that?
He didn't endorse her.
No, Trump was still opposing her.
Yeah.
But we've seen this. We've seen this, Bill. Just because Trump endorses your opponent doesn't mean you're going to lose, as long as you are not hostile to Trump. Because then I think for some reason the voters don't like that. The voters take that personally. But if you are saying nice things about Trump, you can survive Trump opposing you. It seems to be
it's obviously possible. We've seen it happen a few times, but let's, in Georgia, Raffensperger went even farther than just, soft shoeing it.
Raffensperger, though, fair point. I give that one an asterisk, because first, Raffensperger, when it came to stealing the election, was very firm against that. He wouldn't. So I give him credit. I think he's a hero, but he also never became part of the resistance, I don't think. And I also think it deserves an asterisk because he was on the same ballot with Brian Kemp, right? The governor.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that makes a difference, but I think maybe that provided him a little bit of cover as well.
Well, I think because Perdue really failed to launch against Kemp, Trump didn't lean in at all in Georgia, period. I think a lot of those voters stayed home. And even Raffensperger seemed to get a little bit of a Democratic vote crossing over into the primary. I don't know if that made the difference, but definitely gave a little cushion. So a lot of things were in play there. But certainly, I think, Tom Rice, he leaned in hard at the end. He was basically, begging to go down in flames. I impeached it. I impeached that guy. That was the conservative thing to do. Upholding the Constitution. That's right, baby. And, Nancy Mace was definitely kind of bobbing and weaving more.
Yeah. Although I did see a Tom Rice quote where he was like, I just wish January 6th wouldn't have happened, because then, he said, I wish Trump had won re-election. I just wish Trump had won re-election.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if he really means that or not, but if you're saying that you believe Trump tried to stop the peaceful transfer of power, tried to, weaponize a mob to hold on to power, and yet you wish he had just won outright the election. Isn't that cognitive dissonance at the very least? You want that guy to have power the next 4 years and be able to consolidate so that the next time it comes time to, to hand over power to his.
Well, it's clear that Rice doesn't want to live in an authoritarian state, but probably like nearly every Republican, I like the policies. I'd rather he be in there than Joe Biden, because I like the policies that he did.
Sure, but I mean, and I think a lot of Americans are going to be in that position now when you look at the gas prices and the inflation. I'm not saying it's fair, but I think that's a pretty mainstream, pretty popular view right now. That
let's circle back to that later.
Okay, but anyway, I'll stick to the point here. I just don't get the thing where Trump is obviously the kind of person who would try to undemocratically hold on to power. And yet I wish he had won. I wish he had more power for 4 years. It seems.
I mean, it may not be fully consistent, but I think he was trying to speak from sort of the Mike Pence place, where I don't hate what he did as president, but I can't abide by this last act. And so, but I think the net of all this is the Republican primary electorate is short of being a cult. They don't just do whatever Trump tells them to do, but they still like being a party that, one, is pretty stoutly conservative, and two, doesn't chase the tail of the quote unquote liberal elite or media elite. So being sort of an eager lover of impeachment, I think, sends a message to the average Republican primary voter. You want to go to all those Washington cocktail parties, as opposed to being sharing my mindset and my values.
Yeah, but and Bill, I think you're right in terms of your analysis. But I just have to say, having watched again with this hearing and all the things that keep coming out, we're taping this Thursday morning. Just the details that continue to emerge, and the video that we saw last week with that prime time January 6th hearing, it's not close. I mean, you could be the most conservative person in the world. You could go down the list of things that a Reagan conservative ought to believe in. Unless you're okay with overthrowing the United States government, I don't think you could be okay with Trump. And I think you have to impeach. And by the way, I love all these people who keep, Mike Gallagher is going to be, I think, example of this, as someone who I don't think ever voted to impeach Trump. I don't think he did either time. Certainly not the first time. Then again, it's hard to say who the good people are here, right? Liz Cheney didn't impeach him didn't vote for impeachment the first time. I thought he was guilty as sin. And today, Bill, we're going to see what a hero Mike Pence was, and I think he actually was on that day. He did something. He stood up and did the right thing. So it's hard to say, to the classification of good and bad Republicans.
While I respond to you, Matt, again, more how the sausage is made content, I want to double check your microphone settings. Make sure you're getting your standalone mic and not your computer mic.
Thanks for pointing that out.
No problem. But I do want to ask you, as you futz with that,
see what I can do here.
One question that friends of mine ask me, and I'm trying to weigh in my head, does the 1-6 commission matter politically? Does it have any bearing on what the average voter thinks? We know that if you're a Democrat, you're enthralled by what's going on because it is connecting all these dots in such a powerful way, and calling Trump to task. If you're a diehard Trumper, this is all part of the deep state trying to smear Trump. But if you're a regular voter, does this get through to you? Or are you mostly concerned about inflation and not really focused on this? Being you live in real America, Matt, perhaps you can assess this better than I can.
Maybe a little bit, but we're so clouded by living online as well. So I think a couple things. One, I think it is important. I think that voters, at least some voters, can say, okay, right now we are in the midterm elections. And in the midterm elections, I'm going to punish somebody for inflation and gas prices. 2 years from now, if Donald Trump is on the ballot, then I think it'll be a different world. And so I know we like to look at what happens in midterms and extrapolate, and I'm guilty of it too. And I do think sometimes that's fair and prudent to do. But it's a long way of saying I think that this does matter. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people who aren't watching the hearings at all, who aren't paying attention at all to the news coverage. And those people are, we'll call them irredeemable. It's just you're not going to change their minds. So we're always talking about things on the margins. I could just tell you myself, I would love to be able to be one of those conservatives who says, yeah, Trump was horrible, but that's old news, and you guys keep dredging this up, and it's like the Russia stuff, it's overblown, like, and then I see the video, and I just can't do it. I mean, it's untenable if you're being honest, and so that's me. I think if people see it, it's impossible. I just don't see how a reasonable, serious, decent person can see the evidence of what was going on, and there's so many tentacles of it, and think, oh yeah, that guy would be great for president for 4 more years.
So there was a Fox News poll that came out yesterday, and one of the questions that was asked was, "What's the more important issue to you in your vote for Congress?" And I'd say, Fox News, obviously Fox News is terrible, but their polling has generally been on the level. So 41% say inflation, 12% guns, 10% abortion, 7% border security, 5% climate, 5% crime, 4% election integrity, 4% voting rights, 3% COVID, 1% foreign policy. So there isn't a January 6th question there, but you have voting rights, election integrity in there, and they're clearly low down.
And probably half the people who care about that think the election was stolen.
Right, right.
They care about election integrity, think Joe Biden from stealing the election.
Now, I don't think that poll is the end-all, be-all of our understanding of what issues can motivate, because it's technically possible that you could be a swing voter whose top issue is January 6th. You may not be in the majority of swing voters, but it still could necessarily, in theory, it could help on these issues, could help on the margins.
Bill, I think if someone asked me today, now you and I are weird. We follow politics incredibly closely, obviously, and we care about philosophical things like preserving liberal democracy. But I still could imagine me going like, yeah, the most pressing thing right now is inflation. Mm-hmm. And that's
what's in your face every day.
It is. But I've also just sort of made a note, like, never vote for Donald Trump. That's a deal breaker. And
if you're running the DCC, if you're running the DCCC, the D-Trip, and you're in a purple district, but you've drawn a Republican opponent who's an election denier, what's the right play? I mean, on one hand, you can say, look, what most people care about is inflation, so I should talk about that. But that issue naturally breaks against the majority party. Maybe if I highlight how crazy this person is, I can elevate that issue against the tide and give myself a fighting chance. But what calculation would you make?
I think I need more information than that to know. I mean, it's a tough. I think there's so many variables, and what you're describing, Bill, is a making the best of a bad situation.
Yeah,
it's the political environment is very bad for you right now if you're a Democrat running, and you said it's a purple district, and so I would need to see polling in my district. I would need to test messages. Like, is there a way that I can mock my opponent that offends the voters? And is there a way to do it? And I wonder if there's a way to tie the things together too, in a sort of sly way to
Well, I mean, I guess what I would do is I would say, I absolutely agree. Taming inflation has got to be the government's top priority, and I'm prepared to vote for fiscally sound measures that will make sure that we're not overheating the economy. Uh, and I respect the independence of the Fed here to do what they have to do on interest rates. What we don't need is people who are going to be obsessed about relitigating 2020 and not focusing on what matters to regular voters.
Yeah,
I guess that's what I would try to do.
Well, that's a Trumpian move too. You're now flipping it around on them and saying, like, the only reason we're even talking about 2020 is because you guys won't drop the fact that Biden won. Right. Let's move on. It's a tough situation, and it just may be that you can't win in that scenario in this year. It's going to be very tough for Democrats. It's really, really bad out there, Bill.
We talked on a past show, and I wrote about this at Real Clear Politics, that the slate of the emerging slate of Republican Senate candidates is not, they're not, as I said, they're not saying their best. they're not picking, mainstream types that can just ride the trend and ride a potential red wave. You got people who are hardcore Trumpers, election deniers.
Herschel Walker.
I mean, I don't know if you saw it, Matt. There's a second secret son that was reported this morning.
Broken by an outlet called the Daily Beast. Yeah, I saw that.
Now, we had a poll come out, I think yesterday, the day before, in Pennsylvania that had Fetterman, who hasn't even campaigned in a month after his stroke, beating Dr. Oz by 9 points. It was 46-37. You say, well, Fetterman's not at 50, and maybe Oz can still consolidate the Republican vote. But the point I made in my piece was Oz ended that primary with a 48% unfavorable rating amongst Republicans. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to get some of that back, but he's starting from a weak place within his own party, and that could hurt, with turnout. And in the poll that just came out, Oz was way underwater with the entire electorate in the favorable, and Fetterman was up. And I assume that, assuming what's coming out of his camp is on the level, by July, he's going to be back out on the stump, but he's going to look okay. I mean, he can't be hiding in his bed for the next 5 months.
This is a campaign that features a celebrity who pretends to live in Pennsylvania against an Ivy League rich guy posing as a populist who is kept hidden his health problems. I mean, it's just like, but yet I think Fetterman, whether this is authentic or not, Fetterman has the look and feel of a regular Pennsylvania sort of guy.
Fetterman went to a Western Pennsylvania college as an undergrad. He went to Harvard Kennedy School for graduate school. So I think the Ivy League tag has not stuck on him.
It's not going to stick because he oozes an everyman quality, even though his dad, supported him financially while he was mayor of whatever town. But it's not going to stick. That's my point.
Look at you, Beltway elite Matt. Whatever town. That's what they think of us out there in D.C. We're just flyover country.
I live in West Virginia. My mom lives in Pennsylvania. But whatever town, I don't know.
Now, what does Mom think? What does Mom think about Fetterman versus Oz?
That's a good question. I assume she'll vote. I've not had the talk with her. I assume she'll vote Oz, but I don't know.
You don't know what you did in the primary?
I don't know.
This is important information, Matt.
I know. I've been slacking. I
need this. Barrett, right?
What's that?
You think she went Barrett or Barnett? Was it
Barnett? Barnett. I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think she voted Barnett. Maybe McCormick. Maybe if she voted, it was probably McCormick.
Okay, we await. We wait the next lunch.
I'll get her on the phone if you want to we could depose her right now and get to the bottom of this. Actually, Adam Carolla played this game on the radio before, and it was called like Who Knows Adam Best, and he like called up his mom, and then he did like it would be like his best friend and his mom, or maybe his radio colleagues and his mom, and he would be like, "What elementary school did I go to?" Or who was my best friend, and what station am I on? And his mom knew nothing about his career. we could try that game someday. Who knows?
There's we talk about this being terrible conditions for Democrats. Biden's approval is terrible. Inflation is terrible. Republicans are up in the generic congressional ballot polls, and generally Democrats have to do like considerably above a 1-point lead to net seats. So there's all sorts of reasons to believe that Democrats are in serious trouble. And yet I keep seeing Senate polling that is at least competitive. So we just, Fetterman's up. Just saw a North Carolina poll where the Democrat Beasley was at 44 and Bud was at 40. Now, I'm not saying it can't be an outlier because it can, but it's like the polls the other way are like Bud running away with it.
This is South Carolina?
This is North Carolina.
North Carolina. Because wasn't there a Republican Beasley in South Carolina? A Governor Beasley in South Carolina?
That may be. I don't remember.
I wonder if there's any relation. Probably not.
And we saw another poll before with J.D. Vance, only up by 2 points over Tim Ryan. And yeah, I think it's all like people in the 40s with a healthy undecided vote. So yeah, things can snap. The undecideds can come in for the Republican and whatnot. But those polls at minimum don't flash red wave.
Yeah. And then what about, did you say Nevada? Do we know anything about
polling
Nevada?
There?
Well, because Adam Laxalt just won the primary.
Right. And Laxalt, I know there are some folks that thought that his primary opponent, who's a wounded military vet, would have been a better general election candidate than Laxalt. I mean, they're both election deniers. So he got Laxalt as an election denier in a state that Biden won. I mean, not by a lot, but he won. So is that your best bet, in a purple state?
Well, I mean, it does seem possible, Bill, that Republicans would have a huge night in the House and there'd be pretty much stasis in the Senate. I mean, they only need to pick up one seat, so it's a narrow margin of error.
They have to net one seat. So if Democrats can flip Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, which are their two best flipping opportunities. And mind you, if this poll in North Carolina was for real, North Carolina would be a flip. I know there's some squeamishness on the Republican side about Missouri because Eric Greitens, who arguably a sexual assaulter, could get the nomination there. Although the polling doesn't necessarily say he would lose at this point, but again, you kind of if you're Republican, you kind of cross your fingers it's going to work out for you because you're not sending your best. So the more Republicans blow winnable races, now it's more than just flipping one blue seat. You got to flip multiple blue seats. And if Herschel Walker can't do it in Georgia, now what are you down to? Hope in Arizona, but if it's Blake Masters in Arizona, is that going to be your best shot to take down Kelly? Is Laxalt your best shot to take down Cortez Masto? Can they get someone good in Colorado go up against Mike Bennett? Democrats have to at least be a little more optimistic they can hold the Senate. I mean, the House is a little hard to gauge. I mean, we haven't done all our primaries yet. There's less district by district polling to look at. I don't know off the top of my head how many election deniers are running in competitive districts who would make this tricky for Republicans. I mean, even the handicappers probably don't see a lot of district by district polling at this juncture. They will eventually see.
Juncture.
I think when you get later into the season, I think the political report, inside elections, and those people, they'll see more internal polling than the rest of us will see, and that gets factored into their ratings. But yeah, I just think that we have as much as you'd rather be a Republican than a Democrat right now, you can't be super comfortable with because of these other complicating factors for Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's going to be a big night for Republicans. But I will say, I think that it's very possible that they will fail to maximize their potential, especially in the Senate, because of the candidates. Some of the candidates.
If you can keep this, I mean, if you lose the House, legislation was going to be much, much harder. Even Mitch McConnell can't necessarily save you if you can't get through the House legislatively. And of course, the witch hunt investigations come full bore. Hunter Biden ad nauseum for the next 2 years, which will be obviously, I don't know if it would destroy a re-election campaign, but it'd be obviously very annoying. But if you can keep the Senate, you at least can keep doing judges. You at least have that.
Stranger things have happened, Bill. Nobody thought Democrats would keep the Senate in 2020. So, and then Donald Trump went down to Georgia. So you never know.
Now, Matt, I know even in the aftermath of tragedy, even after these massacres, you are very steadfast on gun rights. You've never bent quickly when it comes to guns. Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, I think so. To me, it's not really about guns per se, but it's about, I would say, more likely the Second Amendment. But I also think that, Bill, this isn't in the current plan. I don't think. I think it got dropped. But the idea of raising the age to 21 for purchasing,
that doesn't bother you.
Seems like a good idea. Seems like a good idea to me.
So we send these kids out to be in the military. They want to go hunting just like anybody else does. They can drink a beer. Why can't they buy an AR-15?
That's the argument. I do think that there is something that, especially with young men, the frontal cortex does not fully develop until you're about 25. So you don't, and I have 2 boys, so it's something I think about. And I was a stupid young man. One of my ex-girlfriend's dads told me that all boys should just be locked up until they turn like 21 or something. I think that that there's something there. And look, you and I both know that the military needs and wants people who think they're invincible. But for everything else, it's not a good thing, right? And so we've decided that 21 is the age that you have to be to drink.
Although, right, so in my stream of consciousness, I said they can buy a beer. They can't buy a beer.
You used to be able to.
Right.
Bill, there's an episode of Family Ties where Alex P. Keaton turns 18 and they drive down to Wheeling, West Virginia. You know this episode?
I don't. Is there a sign in Wheeling commemorating this important moment in American history?
Skippy and Alex and someone else drive down to Wheeling, West Virginia. They meet these girls. They pretend they're in the Air Force. Alex claims he's bombing Canada in the morning.
I do remember this episode.
And then Meredith Baxter Burney shows up at the bar.
Right.
And confronts him. Yeah. So it used to be. It wasn't that long ago. This is the Reagan era. And I think they tied it to highway funds or something. Like, unless you couldn't get, we're not going to tell you the drinking age has to be 21, but you're just not going to get any money. But whatever the case may be, I think that obviously we have to be careful about curtailing Second Amendment rights because of concerns about the slippery slope and all of that. But who's to say that the age shouldn't be 21? I don't know. Like, that's not written in stone anywhere. And I really do believe that people, if you want to talk about a wait period, now maybe they could have gotten the gun anyway, but a lot of the people who do stupid shit when they're 18, 19, 20, 21 would not have done it at 25. I think that's just a fact. So anyway, is what it is.
Okay, so are you comfortable with this emerging bipartisan gun safety deal? It doesn't have the 21 age.
It's got
criteria.
It's got the red flag law stuff in it. I think that's good.
Well, again, I mean, the specifics are a little murky, but the the basic idea is to give money to states to help them implement red flag laws. And at least as of yesterday, I don't know if anything's transpired today. There's some disagreement between the Democrats and Republicans. If you don't have a red flag law, do you get money for other types of crisis intervention programs? And the Democrats are like, I thought we were incentivizing red flag laws. And Republicans are like, no, we just want to help people with mental health issues. So that the exact contours of that are a little fuzzy at this point.
I mean, the red flag laws seem like a good idea. I think we need to, it's not enough to have the law. There has to be an educational component where you're basically you're encouraging people, family, and other people in the community to drop the dime on somebody. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like there needs to be an educational, cultural change and a component that to make it work. Here's the one that I don't understand, Bill, because it doesn't seem to have anything to do with these mass shootings. There's something about a boyfriend loophole.
Right.
I don't understand why that is in this.
Well, I have a piece in the queue. It's not up yet at the monthly on this very subject. To me, what's very interesting about this deal, and I think on the whole a positive, is it's not narrowly tailored to just address the specifics of Uvalde and Buffalo. Because if you only did that, then you probably would just do age 21, and you might even say, call it a day. These are two 18-year-olds that should be 21. We solved that problem. But my long-standing critique of how we handle these traumatic events is we only think about policies that apply to public mass shootings when the vast majority of gun deaths are suicides. And we don't think about, so just to give you some hard numbers here. Should have the top of my head, I just wrote the darn piece. But
I don't think, while you're looking that up, obviously, it's the data doesn't lie, and it's a tragedy. But I don't think we would be having a big conversation about people killing themselves with guns. Because
we never have,
right? And I don't know that it's a big enough problem, even though numerically it is, that it would warrant supporting, gun control or other reforms. I think that if there's a way to mitigate it, obviously we should do that. But when we start talking about trade-offs and the erosion of liberties in order to prevent suicides, I don't think you would get the buy-in from the public on that.
Well, this is my hope with this deal. So here are the numbers. So annual gun deaths between 2016 and 2020, 5-year period, average about 40,000. And about 24,000 were suicides. That's about 59% of the gun deaths. When you talk about public mass shootings,
city, that's like a town or something every year, right? That's
right. You talk about public mass shootings, number of deaths average over that same period is 70. If I expand the definition, talk about mass shootings that are not in public places, then the average is 418. And estimates about domestic violence incidents are a little sketchier, but there was an estimate done over at 538 back in 2016. They estimate that women killed by guns in domestic violence situations at 765. So again, so a relatively small number based on the entirety of gun deaths, but even that number, the domestic violence number, is bigger than the mass shooting number under any definition. Although I should also add that sometimes domestic violence situations are part of mass shootings. So the point is that we have a very difficult time focusing on the issue in a sustained way because we get all upset at the public mass shooting. And then after about a week or so, we move on to other news and we don't focus on it anymore. And this cycle has gone on literally for at minimum 8 years since Sandy Hook, when we really start, because Democrats were not talking about guns very much at all before that point. I mean, we talked about it a fair amount after Columbine in 1999, but then Bush administration let the assault weapons ban lapse, never did a gun show loophole after Columbine, and then Obama treaded lightly on it until we got to Sandy Hook. But even Sandy Hook didn't kick the system into action because memories fade. So this is an opportunity to say it's not just about Uvalde and Buffalo. The vast majority of gun deaths are not about situations like that. So if we are, I want to be careful, because I think there's a Democratic critique which is fair, which is don't say this is all about mental illness, because that implies that access to guns has nothing to do with it. To the point about, to go back to suicide here, you maybe your gut impression as well, if they didn't have a gun, they would do it some other way. Not necessarily so, because we have research that shows that if you use a firearm in a suicide, you got an 82.5% chance of actually killing yourself. Whereas if you're, trying to overdose, it's 1.5%. If you're jumping off a building, it's 34.5%. If it's hanging, it's 61.4%. The number, the highest success rate, quote unquote, is guns. So if you could cut down access to guns to people who are in a difficult emotional state, you're going to cut down the number of suicides.
I agree. I agree with you in one sense. I think that you can't just try to chase tragedies and pass bill, because every time one of these mass shootings happens, whatever possible reforms are, you're like, well, that wouldn't have worked. That wouldn't have actually stopped this. And that oftentimes is true. And so I think it's a mistake to fight the last war, so to speak, and just try to tailor a legislative solution to whatever the last tragedy was. I think that's a mistake. And so I agree with you on that point. But here's my concern. I think that there is a moment right now where we have a chance to do some pretty decent, reasonable reform that will have bipartisan support, which is a major accomplishment, I think, for America right now, considering where we are in terms of polarization. And once you start throwing in things that feel to me like maybe it's more of a liberal social agenda, or it's not applicable specifically even to the topic at hand, not the specific mass shooting that just happened, but just broadly speaking, it's not part of the mass shooting conversation to begin with. At least not in terms of the high profile cases. Then I think you risk losing Republicans who might get cold feet all of a sudden and look for an excuse to back out of a deal.
Well, the boyfriend loophole aspect about this is politically interesting, because there was an attempt to close. So just so everyone understands, if you are convicted, I believe you have to be a convicted felon domestic abuser, or have an active restraining order on you. Someone, if I'm not getting this right, please correct me. That's my understanding.
You're talking about a good chunk of our voters now, Bill. I'm joking.
If you're in that camp, then you can't buy a gun, and you're in the background check system. But you got to be a spouse. If you're not a spouse, then it doesn't apply. So they're trying to expand the definition. Say if you're a domestic abuser, got a restraining order, you're not a spouse, you still are banned. You're still in the background check system. And apparently, so an attempt to close this loophole was tried in February with the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, and Joni Ernst and I think Murkowski were on board with it, but they couldn't. But the NRA was not on board, and they couldn't get other Republicans on board. And so they said, you know what, if you want to pass the Violence Against Women Act, you got to drop this one. And so it was dropped. So in very, very recent history, they were unable to get to 60 on it. So I'm curious if this stays and how it stays, because apparently what happened was, and I believe Cornyn said this is in there because Kirsten Sinema asked us to put it in there. We're respecting her role in this process. She said it's important to her, and we're putting it in. But they're still probably hung up on how exactly are you defining, a non-spouse, or no, a non-traditional relationship. The Republicans still want it to be somehow defined as a long-term relationship, whereas
And would this
Democrats are
be
more.
presumably just so that someone you're dating couldn't level a false charge against you wantonly and try to take away your rights?
I mean, I assume that's what the NRA types are concerned about. You're taking away someone's constitutional right without due process. You slap a restraining order on somebody; they haven't had a chance to defend themselves in court, and you're taking their gun away. I assume that's what the complaint is. So they're trying to hash that out. But let's say, Matt, they do hash it out. They find something that gets into 60. There's also portions of the framework that talk about crackdowns on illegal trafficking and straw purchasing, which again, not relevant to Uvalde and Buffalo because those were not purchased through illegal gun traffickers. Would you, Matt Lewis, say, you know what, this wasn't directly about Uvalde and Buffalo, but you know what, it's not fundamentally undermining Second Amendment. It's got 60 Republicans, and you get the Matt Lewis seal of approval here.
I think so, Bill. I'm not outraged by anything that I've seen, except for the shootings. That does outrage me, and they keep happening. And as you sort of noted, the numbers, in the context of suicides, the numbers are not large, but the toll this takes on a civilization, the terroristic aspect, the emotional turmoil and fear that this dredges up, I just don't think we can just keep letting this happen indefinitely. And I certainly believe that access to guns are not the only problem, that there are mental health issues. And I'm glad that this addresses that. I will say, I mean, again, just to circle back, I think it's not, if we have these red flag laws, we need to also have like a public education campaign. See something, say something. Just the same way that after 9/11 that we were all on high alert, we need to be on high alert for this as well.
It's a hard subject, but we have examples. We have two recent examples where we have the Buffalo shooter and the teenager in Michigan who were flagged, informally flagged by their school systems for talking openly about. One mentioned murder suicide in like a questionnaire. The other one was doodling in class with something, and they talked their way out of it. They talked their way and said, "I was just joking. I'm not really going to do that." And then then soon did.
Yeah.
It's obviously it's a very heavy thing to take a kid out of school, and
and you could take someone who is just joking, or I mean, look, I've got two boys, and kids and all their friends, they love, I'm telling you, they love guns. They love playing guns. They love video games that have guns. This is not just something that weird, disturbed kids, boys particularly, I'm sure there's girls too, but there's a hard wiring thing there that they just love it. And you could potentially, if you overreacted and like this, I saw, I'm thinking of a teacher now, like he was drawing people, army men shooting, and I'm going to flag this. And like, you could mess up a normal kid who's just normally developing by freaking out and, throwing the flag when you shouldn't. So I hear what you're saying, that you could,
but with these recent examples, this even goes, this is not quite analogous, but Columbine, Harris and Klebold they were caught stealing, and they were in a youth diversion program involve therapy, and if you read the great book Columbine by Dave Cullen, it gets into this. I mean, Eric Harris was just a quintessential psychopath, and put on a deliberate front to, say the words that would impress the therapist, so he would get out of the program, and and played him like a violin. So you have to be wary of someone just saying, "Oh, I was just joking," because young children can be manipulative.
They can. I have to tell you, I had an incident with my son a few years ago where there was some dispute at his school. Now, he was like 8 years old at this point, not 16 or whatever, but still. And I got called in, like in the middle of the day. I think I went to pick him up, and they yanked me out of my car, and I'm sort of ambushed in a meeting now with the principal and my son. And he had said something. There was some dispute. I can't remember the details, but he had said something like, "I want to fire the school." He meant terminate their employment. I think they interpreted this as he wanted to burn the school down. You know what I mean? It's just like, I mean, I am sympathetic to false accusations, but by the same token,
but we were. I think we have enough examples to say, you know what, school administrators, parents, other people who interact with kids need to lean in harder, need to flag people, if the worst thing that happens to you is that you get some extra therapy, like, you'll survive. Therapy is not inherently bad. Therapy, almost anybody could use some sessions of therapy. And if it sends the message to, teens across America, don't joke about this. Do not, just like you don't joke about it going on to an airplane, you don't joke about it in a school, you don't joke about it, you don't text about it, you don't Snapchat about it, you don't do it. And so if that is the standard, anyone who does do it, it's hard to argue that I was just joking argument. You pull that kid out and you give them the help that they need. So we do need to get there, but we also have to remind ourselves that it's not a science. There's no way to do it to perfection. And this deal, I'm not going to sell this deal as the panacea. It's not going to turn everything on a dime. The question, can it help at all, and can we build on it down the road? That I think yes.
And
but I know there's definitely Democrats who are hardcore progressives who are very hesitant about the deal. They think it's going to make Republicans look good and not do anything. And I'm like, you can't. We've been stuck in neutral for 18 years. You got to try something and build on it, but not oversell it at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you had your criteria, and I would add, and does it avoid usurp, sort of like stepping on First and Second Amendment rights, free speech and the right to bear arms. And I don't think it's, considering what we've gone through, I don't think it's egregious, at least what I've seen. I got to write a column. Anything else? Right. I think this was a heavy topic, but I think it was a good discussion. And and you can't say we rushed into it either. I think we had some time to digest where we are. So,
anything else you got to plug?
Nope. Just follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Subscribe to us here at youtube.com/Matt Lewis, and check us out on the audio podcast as well.
All right. Always good to talk to you, Matt.
Good talking to you, Scher.
And I'll talk to you soon.
See you next week in the DMZ.